Everybody, welcome to this week's episode of How to Build a Game Studio. This week I am joined by Laurent Mercure. He is the communications officer of Chainsaw Awesome Games, and it is a conversation I've been wanting to have with somebody for a while. As you know, this is my first time being a part of a studio, so this was a good learning experience for me to learn more about marketing a game and communicating with a community and helping to build a community and that sort of thing. So I loved this conversation with Laurent, and I hope you guys too. So check it out. All right, everybody. Today I am joined by the communications officer for Chainsaw Awesome Games. His name is Laurent Mercure. How are you today, Laurent?
Pretty good, pretty good. Thanks for inviting.
I'm glad to have you on. I think it's really cool to have someone in a different role because we've had a couple founders of studios, and now we
Yeah,
have somebody on the front lines of the studio who's literally out there trying to tell people about their games.
yeah,
So
it gets people's attention. Yeah, it's usually what I'd say a lot of founders of studios end up having to do that stuff, but not everyone is either skilled in that area or want to do that kind of stuff.
yeah, and I think that's the case with our studio is that Kent isn't much for doing like the social media and all that kind of stuff, and so he just leaves that to me. So because I actually enjoy that stuff.
Yeah, it's fun.
So for you, first I got to start with the burning question here.
Yeah.
So what kind of character did you start in WoW Classic?
Oh, I went for a shaman. It's actually a class that didn't play when I played back in vanilla.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I've been playing a bit of that too because a friend was just like, "Here, have a subscription," and I was like, "Okay."
And
Uh,
why not, right? Why
yeah,
not?
why not? Alliance or Horde?
Of course, Ord can't make a shaman in
Oh,
an
that's true.
alliance in vanilla. So that was also the purpose because when I played back in vanilla, I played alliance for before the first expansion. So I really had no idea what was the life of a shaman in vanilla.
Nice. Yeah, I went with a druid, and I'm also playing Horde. So
Good picks. Good
yeah,
picks.
yeah, I think so. Anyway, so you're the communication officer for Chainsaw Awesome Games. So how did you get started in the games industry?
Well, I studied in communications at the university, and video games has always been a passion. So I started working in the games industry maybe 6 years ago, as just a community manager for a small indie studio here in Quebec City, where I pretty much learned the basics on the job because it's very different from what you learn at the university. Not only because community management wasn't a thing that much when I studied, but also it's a very different brand of community management you need to be doing in video games. I like to say that video games were pretty much the first one of the first markets that developed community management as a role because you got to manage a community of gamers. That these things existed long before Facebook. So I started with that very small studio called Genia that actually I think is closed down now. After working in a year there, I worked my longest running job was at Frima Studio, also in Quebec City. I stayed in Quebec City. It's a studio that made mostly servicing projects, but also a few IPs. So I got to work with a small team that was responsible of trying to make their own IPs and market them. A lot to learn there. I started as mostly a community manager. My title stayed community manager, but I did a lot more things, including marketing and PR. So I learned on the job as well. And I joined the team at Chainsaw Awesome Games in 2016, early in the year, and now I'm more officially doing all of these things that I did back at Prima Studio. So not only community management, but the whole shebang.
Everything. So you're in charge of all of the every communication
Yeah,
you
pretty
could say.
much.
Yeah,
I'd say
of
that's
getting your
that's
stuff
why
out there.
the role. I think the title sums it up the best because I'm responsible of everything that's outgoing communications and incoming communications that are towards the studios. I'm representing representative of the studio online and in person.
So you said with your first job you had to learn on the job. Are
Yeah.
there any mistakes that you think that you made that you learned from
Oh yeah,
during that first job?
most definitely. On the very first job, thing I learned is that gaming communities are kind of a bit separate. Like if you're trying to promote, I was working on a browser-based game back in the day, so that was a thing. That was even before Facebook games were super popular. There was still
Hmm.
a big brand of just browser-based games, while console gamers are not really into browser-based games. So one of the things I did was like spot online forums that were about gaming, and I would drop information about that coming browser-based games or stuff, and it like either had no knowledge that it was a thing, or found that it wasn't really gaming, and they were like almost insulted that I was telling them about a browser-based game. So that's a thing that you gotta learn is that no games are for everyone. So you really need to kind of focus your efforts on the right crowd.
So it's good to know your audience.
Very
Um,
good. It's very important.
yeah, especially you can almost say it's akin to almost a console game and a mobile game
Yeah.
nowadays.
Oh yeah. Most definitely. These two they rarely mix. I mean it happens.
Mm.
A lot of gamers will be saying that they're mostly, for example, a PC gamer, but they launch a mobile game here and there. Um, uh, it's possible, but they're mostly passionate about their first platform of gaming. So if that's PC, that's PC, etc., etc.
So take us through like a normal day to day for you. What would you do in a day as the communications officer at Chainsaw Awesome?
I'd say that that answer is really depends on where we are in the development cycle. It's closely linked to where the game we're working is at. For example, if I'm working on a game that's about to be launched, there's a lot of to be working on developing a community, um, talking to press, or it really depends on where I am in the marketing cycle. I will either have conversation with the community, like telling them, okay, we're going to be launching on this or that day. If we're running beta phases, we did that a lot with our previous game. So it's all about collecting feedback. It's like announcing that, okay, this day and that day you'll be able to play, send all the feedback back to me, and then I filter it. Um, and tell the team about what were the main takeaways of that beta phase, for example. And if I am right now, like I'm right now, it's a weird moment to be a communications officer because we're pretty much not doing a lot of communications because
Mm.
we're starting to work on a new project that we're not announced, so nothing can go public about that. So we're mostly working on. Uh, I'm planning out what we'll be doing in the future, and we're trying to find ways also to fund the project. So there's a lot of business development going on in there. So a lot of emails.
Yeah, I can understand that because we're at a similar point where we're working on our first game and we have nothing to announce or show yet.
Yeah,
So
so you're
it's
in the same, I'd say in the same space that we are at the moment. So it's not announced. So there's I'd say fewer fronts to fight on, but
mhm.
they're very important. Like planning my marketing, it's going to be important that my planning is done well. So when we actually jump into it, it's well thought, and I can just roll with it and execute my plan, and not like second guess at every moment, is it the right thing to do? Because I will have done the thinking before, and of course, finding funding for your project. That's right. Well, that's the most important part.
Yeah.
So it's a crucial part I'm working on at the moment.
So far you guys have had a few successful games.
Yeah,
You've had Night Squad, which admittedly, for Kent, our studio head, Whenever he comes home, and there's a bunch of us in a room, at 9 times out of 10, Night Squad gets pulled up somehow, and we're all playing that game because it's a lot of fun to play with a bunch of people. Um, and you've had Aftercharge as
Yeah,
well. Uh,
it was
so so for those games, I'm sure you initially started by showing them off. Um, what is the process like to actually get those into someone's hands that's gonna actually see it for the first time?
well, it's all starts by kind of establishing when you want to start talking about your game. Uh, it's a matter of having a plan and saying, okay, how long can I keep people's attention? So when do I start? And when you know when you're planning to start, you kind of that's how we work because I don't marketing isn't driving the production. I'm just following along. So I check with the team what will we have at that moment. Is it going to be something that's showable? Are we going to be doing an event like a convention, a PAX or something? It's usually a good way to start. Uh, you announce that you announce to the world that you have a game, you're working on this. You have at least a trailer that can be really minimal. We started communications around Aftercharge with something that was very basic for a trailer. The game wasn't super advanced in development, so not many environments, many characters to show, but at least we had something. And then we planned our first show. It was early 2017. Get our first show with the game. So that's how you start publicly, but there's a lot of job that's done not publicly when you have something that's showable to people behind closed doors. So something that's a prototype, very polished, you can start showing it to uh, potential partners, first parties, publishers, funds. Also, people are who have actually the means to help you bring that game forward. So yeah, in reality, I think that's the first step. Start talking about the game behind closed doors to a people that can help you push it forward. And but it doesn't have to be as polished and when you're showing to the public because these people are used to be shown uh, games that are very rough,
Hmm.
definitely unfinished at in all the ways. Um, So, but for that, you need like kind of I'd say a first slice, vertical slice of the game, something that's exciting. You need to be showing them that, and after that, once you have revealed the game to the world, you have your fine set of months that you have planned that this is your pre-marketing campaign. So, what events will you be going to? What will be your different PR beats? For example, if you're revealing a game that has a set amount of feature, maybe it's a good idea not to give all of these features out at
Hmm.
announcement and keep one or two. Two might be a bit risky because you don't get the attention of press that many times. But at least one key feature that we want to keep to show later on to the press, and they're like, "Oh, this game that we've covered before, well, they've just announced that they'll have that as well." And then if you can combine that with a convention as well again, to get the attention of people, to keep your people interested until you get to the launch.
So it's about having a lot of synergy
Yeah, yeah,
around each announcement and planning out each step of the way.
yeah, exactly. Because you need to start to have something to say when you figure out, okay, I have something to say. It's just a matter of just not just saying it, but planning how are you going to be announcing it to people? Are you going to try to get press, or you might try to, for example, work with a partner. For example, if you have signed something to be exclusive on a platform like PlayStation, maybe they're going to be helping you out promoting that new feature so they can have uh, a, a tweet out with your new trailer, and that's going to give you a lot of eyeballs. And it's worth something.
Makes a lot of sense. Um, so for you, what's it like actually setting up at a convention for the public?
The actual process of setting up.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of the process, and then just actually being there, showing off the game.
Well, planning a show like I'll take PAX for
Hmm.
example because that's a show that well, it's mostly all the consumer shows I've done. I've done RTX once and Gamescom once, but I've done PAXs. Um, these show they need I'd say not that much of planning. To be honest, they're pretty simple and they're used to having a lot of video games shown because they're a pretty much only video game show.
Hmm.
So a few months in advance, you decide that you want to be heading to that show, and you quickly reserve hotel rooms. I'd say it's the first step in all the plannings for my conventions is book hotel rooms or Airbnb or book your staying because that's the first thing that flies
Yeah.
when the dates are announced. So you book your transport, and if for example you need to be shipping things out, you need a company that's going to help you do that because if you have a booth that requires to be shipped out, it's very complicated, especially for us. We're in Canada. It, it
Gotta imagine.
it's far more complicated going through the customs. So you need a company to do that. So you need to be, at least tell them a few weeks in advance, maybe a month or two in advance, that you have this amount of material that you need to be shipped on the convention floor, and it's going to be handled by people from the convention. It's very there's a process you kind of need to follow if you have a big booth. But alternatively, like a lot of people are doing, especially in the indie space, all you need is a TV and a computer. That's it. And it's cool. It makes for a good job, and it's definitely less expensive. And well, that's the reality of indie game development. You want to cut costs when you can, and having a big booth that drives like awe isn't really necessary for indie
Hmm.
game. We've tried that. We had really expensive and cool looking booths for Aftercharge, but like, was it a good return on investment? It's really hard to say.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell that early on.
It's always hard to tell. It's
Yeah.
marketing, so you never never really know unless you're doing direct advertising. You don't
Hmm.
know what kind of traffic this or that decision gave you. And as far as showing the game, to me, if you were to ask me, that's my favorite part of the job. Just being at a convention, it sounds tiring, but you get so much energy from people. They try your
Hmm.
game, they're like, "Oh, this is so cool," and you're like super happy of getting all of these good comments, sometimes constructive comments that are going to help you continue development of the game. You just watch people have fun, and it's a great moment. It's super fun, but it's also extremely tiring. So most of the time, it's taxes are 4 days now.
Yeah.
So 4 days of just standing and talking and repeating the same hook that you wrote or practice in your head a bit before, and you're like, I'm gonna throw that hook at everyone that comes around and see if it sticks.
And you're just hoping it does.
Yeah, well, and if it doesn't, you try something different. Like, okay, this sentence, for example, doesn't click. People just look at me with uh complete misunderstanding. So you tweak it, and then you meet people. You have people sign up to your email list or your Discord server, and you feel like you're actually building your first community. So that's really, to me, it's the best part of the job.
That's awesome to hear. If you, what have you learned? Is there anything that you didn't know going into showing at a convention that you've learned to basically make your next convention stay better?
Yeah, well, a lot of small things, a lot of small things. I think the first thing that I've learned when we started marketing for Aftercharge, and we invested a lot of money in the looks of the booth. It was a big booth, a 10 by 20, but also not only that, it was a structure that needed to be kind of built before. It was heavy. Um, People were standing up, so that was on the purpose. I wanted people to be standing up, so it's more dynamic instead of sitting down. Felt
Mhm.
like people wouldn't take the time to sit down and would just breeze through. But when we compared to another booth that we designed that was a lot lighter, extremely less expensive, we had the same results. So I'd say that one takeaway is for me, maybe it's different from project to project, is not invest don't invest too much in like the booth design, especially as an indie studio. I get it that publishers they have the money to do it, so
Mhm.
like go crazy. But as an indie dev, I don't you're not gonna get a lot more out of it. Another thing is press appointments. Like you gotta remind them that they have a press appointment. I had a lot of cases that I have had almost full schedule of press appointments that I did, um, but either they didn't show up or they when I told them about, oh, I forgot it, I'll be there,
Mhm.
and press is kind of, especially if you're announcing a new game or you're releasing a new game, it's time to get some press. So press is pretty important part of attending a convention like a PAX. So if you're there and you're showing the game to consumers, that's all fine. You're collecting people on your Discord and potential fans, that's fine as well. But you really hope for a big article coming out of it, like I don't know, PC Gamer or Kotaku saying this is the best new thing ever.
Mhm.
That's the dream. So you gotta be really, I would say you gotta not, you don't have to be intense with press, but like stand up for yourself. You've made an appointment and that person has not shown up, ask them if there's any way they can show up again another time. And like at some point they were interested, so they should not be insulted if you're following up with
Mhm.
their request of having an interview.
I I think that's really good advice.
And
This-
another one, I would say that would be my last one. I could talk about conventions all days. Um, would be that you're actually your call to action is the most important thing that needs to stick with your fans. So if your game is out, you can't have a fan leave the place without you saying that it's available now.
Mhm.
Go get it on Steam or on Xbox, or even better, we can sell it to you right now. We have Steam keys. Like you need to convert as directly as possible because these people they've just played, they had fun, and they are at the convention. It's a trip for them most of the time. So they're here to have fun, and they're not looking too much at what they're going to be spending. They had fun, have a game there that they want to play again, buy it. So your call to action, buy it, needs to be kind of important. And if you're not out, which is most of the time, people are usually running conventions before launching. Well, you need to really tell them to sign up. They can maybe win something if they sign up for your newsletter, or they join your Discord, they get something, or you want them to join kind of right away because you have, for example, a beta test coming up. You like the game? Okay, well, if you want to play it again, you can go back home and join this Discord, and on X date you'll be able to play, and that needs to stick out. They can't just leave. You're trying your game and they're like, "Oh, it was nice," and that's it.
Yeah, because there's so many games there that
Oh yeah,
by that point, who knows what they're gonna remember.
exactly. They're going to be playing a lot of games, and you want to kind of stick out of it once they get home,
Yeah, that makes a lot of
or
sense.
convert them right on the spot if that's possible. But you want to be one of the things they remember from their adventure at PAX.
Yeah, so I mean, they get home, they see an email about this game that's coming in beta. Oh yeah, that's right.
Hmm. Exactly, with a big screenshot at the top. Okay, yeah, that's this game that I've played because they probably don't remember the title, but hey, it's that game with the robots stuff. It was fun, and then you have caught them. They're in your bag.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's some really good advice right there. Um, did you at the events? Did you guys have any like handouts or anything for people
Yeah,
like cards and stuff like that?
yeah, we always have like basic business cards of the game. We have
Hmm.
business cards for ourselves if we have a business conversation or press conversation. They want my address to get the press kits or stuff. But for people, for just consumers, we should have yeah exact a small card, the size of a business card. Don't go too big because they're gonna throw it away.
Hmm.
Um, and just listing the very basic information about the game, and of course your call to action needs to be there because yeah, a lot of people they just wander around the convention center, they look at something that's cool, they don't really want to take the time and sit down and play it, but it looked cool, so they want to kind of uh keep something from it. So yeah, sometimes people even ask for a card. They're like, "Hey, this game looks nice. Do you have a card or something?" And you give them a card, and they're good to go. And outside of that, what we did, and that was, I think, one of the most successful thing we did with After Charge at the convention was uh, we had glowing bracelets,
Nice.
because the game is all neon colors and bright blue colors. So everyone that tried the game, we're we can't afford like AAA's to give T-shirts to everyone who tried the
Hmm.
game, but at least they got this glowing bracelets that they can just wander around the convention center and everyone can see it. Um, and that worked pretty fine. People were excited about the bracelets. Some people even asked, "How can I get one?" Well, you just need to play, and that made them play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially, these are people that are going to be wandering the show floor for a while. So other people see those bracelets, like, hey man, where'd you get that bracelet?
Yeah, well, we didn't witness any of these conversations, but they probably happened.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean that makes a lot of sense to do something that other people on the floor will notice,
Yeah.
so that it drives people to your booth. So for Aftercharge, you guys are doing. It seems like you're doing mostly multiplayer focused games.
Yeah.
So did you? I can't remember. Did you guys have a beta test for that?
Yeah, after charge we ran short beta phases. Um, because of course it's an online multiplayer only game, so it's very focused on player count. So that's the most important thing, that the thing that we were scared of. So when we were planning on running alpha, we even started in alpha.
Mhm.
Alpha tests, it was only a few hours. It started like our first alpha test um, was 12 hours. It's very, very short, but we drove all the community that we've built during previous conventions. I think we did 3 conventions before our first alpha, and it was like the time to reactivate all of these people and say, okay, you liked that game a long time ago that you tried. It's time to play it. So you go you can we had keys. You can go to this website, you get your Steam key for the game, and then you can try it for these 12 hours. And then we collected feedback, and we ran these alpha tests pretty much once every 2 months, and they grew longer and longer, and then we ended up on doing a beta, and yeah, we had an open beta that was only a weekend. We didn't dare to do long stretches of time, but yeah, these tests were really helpful in understanding player behavior, things that you can't really see in
Mhm.
a convention because you're always there. We wanted to see how will players be behaving without us around? Will they understand all the things that we're telling them when we're at convention?
That makes a lot of sense. So for you, that is taking a lot of communications in. How do you go about organizing all of that feedback to bring back to the team?
It's not that complicated because I'm usually always we did most of that through Discord, and
Mhm.
I was pretty much plugged in on Discord all the time, and so were most of the team. So they would just look at all the things, and we didn't. I know it sounds harsh, especially coming out from community managers, but all the feedback isn't as valuable. Like there's some feedback can be discarded
Mhm.
because, for example, it might be about a feature that's gonna be staying. So don't complain about that feature. It's core to the game. That's not gonna change. So you can apologize if, oh, I'm sorry if that you don't like that, but that's so super core for the game. I can't change it. So these gets kind of discarded. And then after that, when people are complaining about things we can actually change, we look for things that are kind of trending. Like, is this thing coming up often? And what we've done at the end of each beta test, because that was what I just described was ongoing through the 12
Mhm.
hours of the test. We're like, okay, we're taking all the feedback and we're trying to see if there's anything that we can work on immediately. And once the tests were done, we usually, we did all the time, send a Google survey to all the testers, and then we asked them to just lay it on us. What did they enjoy about the experience? What they think we should have done differently? What should we improve before the next one? And all these things. And I basically the way to process all of that was me reading all of that and taking notes. Okay, this has been said in like 3 times in a row. This was not a good experience for these players, and then I would just bring that feedback back to the team and we would talk about it.
That's awesome. I was curious about that because it seems like there would be a lot of information coming in.
Yeah, it's a lot of reading because especially since I wanted, like, we had access to analytics, so we had numbers,
Mhm.
it's a quantitative data. I needed qualitative data. So, like, describe to me how your experience was. Not rated on a scale of 10. Just was it good? What did you like? And as most importantly, what didn't you like?
Yeah, that way you can try to make a better experience.
Yeah, and fix things. Like positive feedback is good for the soul,
Hmm.
and it's good for the team to get that. It's really fun to get, but it's not as useful.
Definitely. I mean, negative feedback, as long as it's not horrible trolling,
Yeah,
is usually good because it tells you where your problem areas are, and then you can work towards fixing it.
yeah. I actually have some experience with just total trolling that I can manage to kind of convert to a more constructive feedback. Like if someone is going to be, I did a lot of that once we launched, and that happens to any kind of game, so I wasn't worried.
Hmm.
People just saying that our game was trash.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, clearly you didn't enjoy the game, but like, how exactly was it trash? I want you to transform
Yeah.
this into something constructive because that's all right if you didn't like the game. Clearly, you really didn't like it. I kind of need to know why, because it's gonna tell me, okay, is this because the game definitely wasn't for you, or is it a feature that is extremely frustrating for you and probably other people that are just not telling us? And it happened sometimes. I converted total trolls into I wouldn't say fan of the game. They
Hmm.
probably never touched the game again, but at least made it. I transformed that into something useful.
Yeah, it's different when when there's an actual human there challenging you on that.
Yeah, yeah. Usually the reaction, I guess, in front of your computer is like, "Whoa!" There was a I got answers.
Yeah, someone
They
replied to me.
actually yeah, someone replied to my comment saying the game is trash. And oh, that person is an official member of the development team. Whoa, this is serious.
Like, oh, there's a real person there.
Yeah, I always wonder why people are so surprised. I guess that there's a segment of people online who are used to just trolling everywhere, and
Mm.
since their comment is usually of very bad quality and very negative, people never reply back to them, so they're so not used to get a reply, or at least they're used to getting another negative reply, and then they go into a comment battle.
Yeah,
But it's wasn't the case.
yeah, which I don't think those work for anybody in the
Yeah,
long run. So for you guys for Aftercharge, I know that you were initially a part of Xbox Game Pass.
yeah.
So for that, how much did that help you?
Oh, incredibly. I cannot imagine us. It was at the very start. We didn't know that was it would be that kind of outcome. But from the start, when we started developing Aftercharge, the idea was to kind of fish for something like that, a
Mm,
subscription service here or there, because we needed player count. That was the most important part for us. We needed a mass of players having access to the game right off the bat. Um, and Game Pass definitely did that for us. It's a lot of visibility. We kind of knew it already because before Aftercharge got launched into Xbox Game Pass, we actually put Night Squad on Game Pass, and it did well. So we knew that the it was a good visibility, and it made Microsoft a good partner as well in promoting the game. They gave us visibility here and there, so it's definitely something that helped, like incredibly. It, I don't know what the launch of Aftercharge would have looked like without a partner and Game Pass.
yeah, that's interesting because I mean I know I personally I played the game through Game Pass because I hadn't seen anything about it beforehand.
Yeah,
So it got me to check it out, and I thought the game was really cool.
thanks.
So
Well, we definitely got a lot of, especially on Xbox, we got a lot of players that were playing it through Game Pass. And that's all fine because, of course, when we do that, um, we get financial support from Xbox. It's a deal we sign, so it's we're not just giving the game away.
mhm.
There's an incentive for us to do it, of course.
Right. So after it's on Game Pass, did it being on Game Pass help support it in the long run?
After leaving Game Pass,
Mm-hmm.
well, it did change a lot of the reality of Aftercharge when we quit Game Pass. We it was okay. It was the end of the deal that we signed.
Mm-hmm.
So of course we saw the player volume dropping kind of low. It's the sad reality of an online multiplayer game. But the game still works. It's still fun. But we cannot longer um, kind of uh, base the experience on finding a lot of players quickly. So you kind of need to make your own matchmaker.
Makes a lot of sense. Um, so where do you see the future of Aftercharge going?
Well, on that end, I don't know since we started working on a new project,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where 100% of the focus of the studio is at the moment. So not much is going to be changing on that front. The we planned on having more content. We kind of had in mind more content for Aftercharge, but at some point you gotta take the right decision for the studio, and in that case, it was to just leave it be and have it float away, and then we can focus our efforts on something different that I wish I could be telling you about, but I
Right. Yeah. No. So what's your next game? No.
can't. Can't tell, won't tell.
Can't tell, won't tell. I'll get you to tell. um, So with that, for marketing, do you have any advice for anybody that what piece of advice would you give anybody just getting into it? Because I mean, I follow a lot of stuff, I read a lot, I pay attention to a lot of things, but I for the most part I'm fairly new
Yeah.
to the games industry. So for someone like me, what kind of advice would you give starting out?
I There's many advice I could give, but I'll try to get a few on top of my mind. I'd say that one of the biggest learnings that I've got in mostly in Aftercharge is to focus, especially if your game is going on PC, and that's of course the target of a lot of people, is really to focus your efforts on your launch. I know that we've heard many stories long ago of indie games that were announced at one show and then released 4 years later and were an extreme success. But these things are extremely rare these days if you don't really have an established name. What you need to be hitting hard is your launch day. That one day is more important than most probably the 6 or 7 months of pre-marketing you'll be doing. Your launch day is where it's going to happen. Especially, I said especially on PC because Steam is, as you know, it gets a lot of new games every day.
Oh yeah.
So you have your moment of glory there, and it's going to be a few hours. And if you need to be making money in these few hours, because that's gonna kind of start the Steam visibility machine. If you make money, they're gonna be pushing you in it with your within their algorithm, going to be pushing you in a lot of new sections that like, okay, you're trending, okay, now you're top grossing, now you're and if you keep making money out of that visibility, you're going to get even more. So it all starts with having the biggest possible visibility the moment you launch. So if you were planning on advertising, which is something I didn't do a lot for Aftercharge, but I think I'm gonna do more for our next project. Facebook advertising, I don't know,
Hmm.
maybe YouTube advertising. I'm gonna look into all of these things that I didn't do much. It needs to be happening on that day because you need to convert as much people as possible. And all your pre-marketing kind of efforts, if they're not focused on like the week before launch, they need to be kind of very close to launch,
Yeah.
like a few months tops. When we started, um, even initially when we started pre-marketing for Aftercharge, my plan was 1 year. It's already that was a bit too long, I think, um, because you have time to kind of lose the hype. Even if you have someone super hyped about your game at the first
Hmm.
show you're doing, they're like, oh, this is going to be next week game. 1 year is a very long time. It's a very long time. You can lose that hype extremely quickly. So that would be shortening your pre-marketing campaign. That's definitely something I will be trying even more. Is is one of my tips there. So if you plan on just announcing the game because you want to be announcing your game, but you're not sure when the game is going to be finished,
Hmm.
that's risky because it can take maybe a 1 year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then maybe the very first show you did, and the very first burst of visibility you got an announcement, you're gonna have lost most of that potential by the time you get to launch. And it comes back to my first tip. Your launch is when it needs to happen. So all the efforts they needs you be doing in your pre-marketing, they needs to be still relevant at your launch. So if you had some visibility at the announcement of your game, that's fine, but
Hmm.
that visibility needs to be still relevant when you actually release your game. That's why most of the AAA games, it's a completely different market, but still most of the AAA games, when they announce their launch date. They already know when they're going to be launching because they're
Hmm.
so far along. They know they're going to have that short window of pre-marketing when they actually already have a launch date. So it's shorter than a lot of indie games are doing. So shorten your pre-marketing.
That's very good advice. And that's why I wanted a marketing person on the podcast,
Yeah,
because
all the time.
it's not something that yeah, someone else would necessarily know in the studio.
No, especially if they look around and look at games that were successful. And yeah, of course, there are a lot of fairy tale stories of games
Mm,
that were announced. Like some people were counter argumenting with me that Cuphead was a counter example to my thing. Yeah, you're right. They announced so far before actually launching, but they picked up the attention like no other games at that time. It was, oh, look at that art style, and then
yeah,
they sign exclusivity with Xbox, and then it's a different story. You can kind of hope to get that level of hype, but you cannot count on it.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, especially like Cuphead's a good example because I mean it was so unique
Yeah,
that people were gonna be gravitated towards it, regardless. I think. But if your game is very good, which I mean, very good games release every single day.
that's
Um,
the
you
sad
know,
truth.
yeah.
Too
So
many
I
good
mean,
games.
exactly. Like that's we're living at a time where there's too many good games that even if your game is very good, it might not stand out
Oh
amongst
yeah.
everything else. So, but yeah, I think that's unless you have can think of anything else real quick.
No, well, I could talk about it all day, but I
Right.
think most of the important takeaways of my recent experience marketing a game were that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on because that's the kind of stuff that like I want to hear personally,
Well, I
not just
hope
the
your
audience. So
listeners are also interested in that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think so. I think we have a lot of people from the game development community that maybe they're in a different avenue and just don't know this stuff. And I think that's interesting to find stuff from all sections of the development process. So
Yeah,
um,
because even if you don't have like I said earlier at the very beginning, even if you don't have someone that's taking care of marketing and community management in your staff, well, it's gonna have to be done anyway.
yeah,
So someone's gonna have to do it.
yeah.
If it's not an expert, it's gonna be anybody. It can be your artist or your programmer,
Or if
as
you're
long
doing
as
everything, it's got to be you.
gotta be you.
You know.
No one's gonna do it for you unless I don't know, you sign with a publisher, but that's another
Mhm.
story.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very different case. But anyway, Lauren, where can people find you?
Well, the most usual place where I hang out is Twitter, so you can find me at Laurent Mercure uh, on Twitter. I tweet about mostly gaming. That's life.
Yeah,
Gaming and my kids. That's pretty much what I tweet about.
as you should. And if anybody wants to know more about Chainsaw Awesome Games, where can they go?
They can go to chainsawsome.games. That's our website. Not a lot of stuff on there right now because we're, like I said, starting development on a game that we can't announce. So our news might be a bit old,
Hmm.
but they're gonna find there all the social media they can follow, the usual Twitter, Facebook, and our Discord.
All right, awesome. So go check that out. Go check out After Charge and Night Squad, games that I've had a lot of fun playing. And again, thank you very much, Lauren, for being on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that is the end of my interview with Laurent Mercure. Again, follow him on Twitter at Laurent Mercure. You can also follow Chainsaw Awesome Games at chainsawsome.games and see what they're working on next when they get ready to announce it and all that good stuff. And thank you guys for listening this week. It was a great conversation. I loved having Laurent on. Hopefully, we can have him on again in the future depending on when they're ready to talk about their next game. I think that'd be a great conversation to have. especially when we can talk about more about what they're doing as far as their launch and marketing and that sort of thing. So hopefully that's in the cards for the future. But until then, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes. If you rate and review us, it helps other people see us, and we become more visible as a podcast, and hopefully more people will listen to us. And if you give us some good reviews, maybe we'll read them on the air. We would love to hear from you. And then if you have any questions for the podcast, any questions for us, or if you're a game dev and would like to come on the show and talk about your studio, we would love to have you. So definitely reach out, social media at winterborngames.com, and I will read that email and I will get back to you post haste. So thank you guys again for listening, and we'll be back next week.